This Real Agriculture podcast is brought to you by Genesis Fertilizers. Nitrogen fertilizer is your farm's #1 expense. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. Security and earnings through ownership is the solution. Visit Genesis today at genesisfertilizers.com to learn more.
Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio. I'm really fortunate right now to be joined by Lorne Hepworth. Lorne, great to chat with you.
Great to chat to you too.
Now, I'm not sure which title to put on you, Lorne. I guess retired, is that what I should say?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay. Well, the reason we're chatting is because I think it's pretty awesome and very well deserved that you are going to receive the Order of Canada. That is we're going to talk about your career and what led to that, but I guess off the top, congratulations. You got to be pretty excited.
Yeah, thank you. It's when you get that call at one and the same time, it's you're incredulous, you're humbled, and you're gratified, so I'm pretty sure I was sounded pretty dumbfounded when I got the call, I'll put it that way.
So it wasn't something that you've been preparing a speech for or anything like that?
No.
And you know what? I think it's kind of neat. And we have had people in agriculture that have, of course, received the Order of Canada. It's always great to see people who've made a tremendous contribution to the industry of agriculture recognized, not just in the industry, but amongst a broader set of Canadians as well. That's what I think is really cool about this. Lorne, now, there's going to be some of our audience that's going to be like, they know you very well. They've worked alongside you. But for some of the audience that's unfamiliar with your career, let's talk about kind of what that looked like and what led to this kind of recognition. So give us a bit of a summary.
Well, I always tell people I've really had 3 careers. The first one was the 12 years I spent in veterinary practice, mostly when I had my own practice in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. Really enjoyed that. Just great people, a great practice that we built up fairly substantially. And after 12 years, I ended up in politics, which I guess I would count as career number 2, which I did almost for 10 years as well, and was very fortunate to hold some, very interesting cabinet positions. Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Education, Minister of Energy and Mines, and Minister of Finance in the end.
Oh, wow.
So all very interesting. And then career number 3 was, working as president and CEO of what became, during my time, Crop Life Canada, the industry association that represents the plant life science industry here in Canada, which is code words for those that don't know, the pesticide and GMO seed business. So, I mean, that was a really interesting nearly 20 years that I spent with them. A lot of change during that time in the industry with the introduction of genetically modified seeds. So a time of great change also corporately, lots of mergers and takeovers, those kinds of things as well. So that's kind of been the 3 careers, if you like. And then I did some, odd stuff, board stuff as well.
Yeah. So I actually didn't know, Lorne, that you started as a vet.
Yeah. I graduated from the University of Saskatchewan. Actually, we were the 3rd class to graduate out of what was then a relatively new veterinary college in Saskatoon. So I spent a couple of years initially with a great practice in Lloydminster, and then set up my own practice in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And, Weyburn was a city of 10,000. Our practice area was probably about a 30, 40, 50-mile radius all the way down to the border. So a relatively small community by many standards. So you really, a lot of your clients became your friends, and a lot of the people in small communities like that, you maybe didn't know all of them, but a lot of them knew you, which in some ways, in hindsight, not that I was planning it that way, but in hindsight, a country/small city vet, a great kind of a great precursor into the world of politics in some ways, just because you get to know so many people and they get to know you.
I think it's a good example. I think, I've got kids, 3 kids that are in college, just entering their college careers. And there's a lot of stress that we put on kids where it's like, hey, what do you want to do with your life? What career do you want to pursue? And you're kind of a perfect example of how sometimes your career can take turns and lane changes that, no kid entering college would really be able to predict. So, obviously your interest in animal health, being a vet, owning your own practice in Weyburn, and then you fast forward ahead, like say we do, the Back to the Future, Marty McFly, and we skip ahead a number of years, and all of a sudden it's like President and CEO of CropLife Canada. Those two things, like same industry, but those are two entirely different parts of the sector. It's really interesting the path our career can take.
Yeah, I share with people the whole notion that if the same set of circumstances presented themselves again relative to these 3 careers, I'd make all the same decisions again. They were all equally rewarding in their own way. And, not that one set out to contemplate doing 3 careers, but I think to your point, it is a good example of young people shouldn't have to fear that if they start something, either they like it or they see something else that's even more interesting, to not be afraid to jump into it, right? When I went into politics, I didn't even know what they paid. Like, you don't even know if you're going to get elected, but I don't know. I guess other guys seem to be able to buy groceries, so I guess you must be able to. So, it's kind of like a leap of faith. Some of those moves.
Who convinced you to go into politics?
Well, there is a story there. I'm kind of busy one spring and calving season in my practice, and really busy. The waiting room is full. There's trucks lined up. There's clients there with cats and dogs. We're busy. And a couple of guys come in looking pretty well dressed. I'm thinking right off the bat they aren't ranchers because they don't have on the signature cowboy boots. And they kind of politely wait until I've got a minute, and then they say, "Can I? We like to talk to you. Could talk to you in your office?" Well, nobody ever wants to talk to me in my office, right? So
yeah, we're outside.
Anyways,
this is my office, by the way.
So we go in there, and I recognize them that they're a couple of the members of the Conservative Party, which was in the opposition at that time, and sit down at my desk, and I said, "Well, I suppose you guys are here for some money. Well, I want a donation." So I kind of pull open the drawer of my desk and start to write out a check. And one of them says, "Well, we're not here for that, but we'll take the money anyways." And so they want to know if I, consider running for the party's nomination. And I say, thanks. I'm very flattered, but no thanks. I've kind of got my practice going pretty well, and a couple, 3 vets working for me now, and actually can have some time off once in a while. And so they left. And then I found out, this is kind of the world of politics and how it works, is over the next week, about twice a day, some local, what I didn't know at the time, but as it turned out, some local, relatively high profile member of the party would come and say, "Oh, I'd like to talk to you. I think you should consider running." He keeps saying no, but no thanks. And then pretty soon they think, well, it must be his wife that's the problem. So then they send people to see my wife. And anyways, at the end of the day, Fern said to me, "You know what? Maybe you should think about making a change. You seem a little more grumpy when you speed off to do a calving at 2 a.m. So maybe I should think about a change." So that's kind of how it happened. Yeah. And then, I was lucky enough to get the nomination and to be elected, and fortunate that I had, like I said, some interesting portfolios, and also didn't ever have to serve in the opposition benches. So you're always in a position where you could actually make some changes. Whether people viewed them as good, bad, or ugly is another matter. But that's kind of the interesting part, when you can actually, make policy and legislative changes.
So you mentioned Minister of Agriculture, and this is in Manitoba.
Saskatchewan.
Or sorry, Saskatchewan. Yes, right. Weyburn, Saskatchewan. This is in Saskatchewan. Minister of Agriculture, Minister of, you said, Energy, right?
Yep.
And Finance.
And education. Yep.
And education. So that's a pretty broad, those are major portfolios in a cabinet. How similar, or when you were Minister of Agriculture, how similar or different was that experience from those other portfolios?
I would say agriculture is a bit unique in this way. Every year, and it still happens, the federal, provincial, territorial ministers get together in all of these areas. But when I was in agriculture, we had our summer, typically a July meeting, and it was held in different provinces over the course of the years. And your deputy, assistant deputies, senior officials would come with you, and in agriculture, it wasn't uncommon for it to be a fairly family affair. And notwithstanding the different political ideologies that might be around the table, at the end of the day, there was collegiality and a mutual respect. Like I said, notwithstanding the different political parties that were around the table. And I contrast that to energy and mines, education even, and finance, where there just isn't that same collegial community, at least when I was there, it just didn't have that same special feel that agriculture did, which I think really speaks to the nature of the agriculture business, in quotation marks, maybe in Canada and maybe even in the world. It's just a very nice collegial, we may be of different political stripes, but at the end of the day, we're all interested in accomplishing the same things. And in some ways, all you ever argue about is how you're going to do it. And to be agriculture minister in Saskatchewan, because of the importance of agriculture there, you're always pretty honored to ever be able to hold that portfolio.
Yeah, it is one of the provinces, and it may be the province. I probably should be a little bit more even to the point here. I think it's the province still in this country where the broader population of that province very firmly understands the importance of agriculture to the overall economic prosperity of that province. Even in Alberta, I think we've kind of like Calgary, Calgary has other interests, like, sure, for 10 days during the Stampede, it's like, we're all cowboys and cowgirls. But in Saskatchewan, I just think the attitude, Atlantic Canada may be like second, like, the provinces in Atlantic Canada, I think but Saskatchewan, it's still very firmly rooted in what agriculture, they understand. You could go to the middle of Saskatoon or Regina and people are still, they understand ag.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, an interesting anecdote. So when the Aussie company was looking to take over the Potash Corporation,
yeah,
Brad Wall was the premier in a pretty lively debate. I can remember my mom, who was probably in her 80s back then, and obviously had been on the farm virtually all of her life. But, she phones me and says, "Did you hear they're trying to take over the Potash Corp?" So, even at her age, I mean, she understood this was important stuff and critical stuff to Saskatchewan, So you're right. It gets less every year, probably, in terms of the connection to agriculture, just because, every generation is one more generation removed. But still, I agree that there's still probably a bigger percentage of the population there that have a feel for the world of agriculture and empathize when there's droughts and hailstorms and, collapses in pricing, those kinds of things.
Yeah. You said you wouldn't, these three careers, you wouldn't make any changes. But I just want to imagine for a second, I'm curious because politics has changed. Partisanship has become, it's stronger, right? It's a little bit more tribal than maybe it was going back a number of years. Would you go into politics today?
I always tell people I did my turn. It's up to you young people to do it now. But your observations are right on. It's a lot tougher. I'm glad I was there when I was there.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot tougher now because for some of the reasons you mentioned. It's become very hyper partisan in many provinces and in the country. You've got this rural urban split. There's the whole social media thing. It's 24/7. Everybody's trying to grab eyeballs or sound eardrums all the time. And even in the 10 years I was there, ending in 91, by the end of that time, it had also, some of that collegiality had seeped into, the relationships between MLAs across the aisle. But initially, when I was first there, and Minister of Agriculture, Alan Engels was from Assiniboia, actually. My home farm area was my critic in opposition. And even though he might go after me real hard in question period, when we broke at 5 o'clock to go have dinner, we'd walk down the steps. Hey, you want to go for dinner? We'd go for dinner. How were the kids? How was the crop? There was that level of respect, notwithstanding we both had jobs to do. And that for sure, I think, has disappeared and maybe is totally not hardly. I mean, not that some still don't undertake that, but it's getting rarer and rarer, I would say. Yeah.
Well, hey, I think you have hit on a big issue. Not Canada and the U.S. For sure, even probably the U.K., Australia. It's all the same. That's where social media comes into play, and everybody's phone is a camera. And in this case, it could be really used against you. Oh, look at Lorne. Look who he's having a beer with the other side. He's not on our side. And so people avoid it, right? And so then people don't find the common ground. They don't get to know each other. And it's really hard to find consensus when you don't really have a relationship with that person and can find some common ground. Okay, so CropLife Canada. How did that so political career, then transitions to president and CEO of CropLife what became CropLife Canada. Talk about how that transition came to be?
Yeah, well, I was initially the vice president, and then I left after 2 years to head up a company called Canadian Agra in Ontario, with actually holdings across the country, and then came back after 3 years and became president CEO of what then became CropLife Canada. But initially, when I was first brought on board to Crop Protection Institute, when I was Minister of Agriculture, they at their annual conference one year, they'd invited me to be part of a panel, and a couple, well, I guess almost 8-9 years later, they were looking for a president CEO, and they had a headhunter out doing that, and so I guess they knew of me, and this was in 1991 now, and so after we'd lost the election. So they gave me a shout to see if I'd be interested in coming on board with them. So I actually had agreed with another organization. Literally, the morning they phoned and said to this other party, write up the contract. And these guys called me, and I decided I maybe should put a hold on it because it sounded a lot more interesting and maybe more lucrative, to be honest.
Well, that all plays a part. That's a sector too. We've seen a lot of change. Man, there's been a lot of consolidation. You think about the broadness of the membership of the crop protection industry when you were, began that role versus where it is today. CropLife Canada puts on a great conference, Grow Canada, every December. That I think for me, it's one of the best of the year. I always try to make sure I'm there. The numbers, like from a company, like we've had a lot of consolidation. I guess there's been a lot of change there.
Yeah, for sure. But notwithstanding that, if you look at the number of member companies that belong to CropLife Canada today, it probably actually exceeds what it was 10 years ago. Because you've got a lot of, I guess you could call them smaller, newer companies, a lot of them Canadian or U.S. companies that may want to get a toehold. Some of them are, very much in the biological area. So the only reason I kind of was aware of this is I was, like you, I was out at Grow Canada last fall.
Yeah.
I did a great job in the panel, by the way. Really Thanks, good Lorne. Job.
I appreciate that.
And I sort of took a look at the last annual report. It really surprised me that there was that many companies. But certainly during my time, just every time we held a board meeting, I had one less company because they'd swallowed the other guy up, And so there was a lot. And it spoke to two things, really, consolidation in the face of narrowing margins. And secondly, if you're going to spend 8, 9, 10, 11% of sales on research for new products, you need size and scale.
Yeah.
And, that's the kind of number that these guys, at least in my day, and I suspect it's still the same, were spending in terms of their R&D budgets to get these new technologies out there for the farm community.
It's a really good point. There are some realities of being in the, we have to do research to have product development. And then when we do think we have something, a product that solves a problem, then there's the whole regulatory and registration hurdles that are there. Like the dollars that are spent pre-commercialization. I don't care if it's variety development or it's developing a molecule, or it blows me away. I'm so fascinated having conversations with those companies because I'm always learning it's a lot of money. It's hard for smaller companies to navigate all that because let's be honest, a small company, you're undercapitalized.
Yeah. No, I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but if you had, say, 100 units of costs to get a new product to market,
yep,
the amount of money that's now being spent on the regulatory piece, meeting the regulatory piece, has expanded greatly in the last 20 years. Absolutely, yeah. It's just a never-ending sort of story. The whole business of constantly working hard with government officials to have an efficient, science, risk-based approach to regulation, as opposed to political oversight and a hazard-based program, sort of where Europe is. I feel like I spent my whole life advocating for that, and it's just a constant struggle. And of course, that part of that was dealing with activists that their first point of attack was the urban pesticides. The whole cosmetic ban.
Yep.
And the disconnect between, well, if they're so bad for urban people, how is it that the farmers use them and they're all pretty healthy? But those arguments you couldn't win with them. Then the other debate was the whole around, which to some degree continues today, the whole GMOs, right?
Yeah.
But I see recently it looks like China has done some approvals, so that's positive, because that 15 years ago that was still a hill we were trying to climb. So
I was going to ask you, like, and you kind of just did, but I'll just reinforce it that now we talk a lot about the regulatory burden and regulatory hurdles and regulatory modernization and trying to make regulatory hurdles parallel as much as we can to, like, major trading partners like the US. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening in that area. It sounds like that's like, and I'm not making light of it, but it seems like those are like, that isn't like a new thing. You were like, it's evolved. Like, so you were also that the main stuff on your desk as a file that you were working on, and it's kind of continued on to today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the stuff you mentioned, international harmonization, an efficient system, better data sharing, which actually there was some progress made on it with the US regulator, some of those things. But still, and one of the big challenges, and I don't know how it is today, but the whole minor use registration process.
Yeah.
I mean, spending hundreds of millions of dollars for an approval for the big four, like corn and soybeans, wheat, canola, those kinds of things. That's one thing, but getting approvals for smaller crops, but nevertheless important crops, especially important in some areas, whether it's blueberries or apples or or even going back in time when in the 80s, when it was almost at the fledgling stages, lentils, for example, approvals for those, they put in place a minor use program to kind of help producers get some products in that area. But I always used to say, actually, it wasn't even just minor use; it was micro uses that we were looking at. Some of these products, the total sales of a given pesticide in the market might have been $35,000, and yet it was going to be 350,000 to get the product registered. So as much as the companies wanted to support those farmers that were looking at that individual commodity, it just didn't pencil out for them. So minor use programs were meant to kind of help with that. So, and you look at the diversity of crops now, even in, when I was a kid on the farm, it was wheat, oats, and barley, right? Now we grow wheat because we need it for a rotation. It's just about everything else that pencils out. And in Ontario, where I now live, I don't know what, we got about 140 different commodities, I think, 120, 140, something like that. It's Ontario's greatest strength and greatest weakness at one and the same time, because we can't be all things to everyone,
Well, what I love, Lorne, I'm not surprised at all, is how strong your passion still is for the industry and what is happening. And I did see you at Grow Canada there back in December. I think it's awesome. You could just see it still fuels you, even though you have now, we've put this title on you of retired. You're still very, very passionate about it. So when we think about the Order of Canada, what does that mean to you?
Well, like I said, at the time when you get the call, it's incredulous, it's humbling, and it's gratifying, but it really is a reflection of, a lot of the interesting things that I had the opportunity to do during the last 50 years or so. And it also really speaks to the many, many exceptional people that I had an opportunity to work with. I'm a big believer, in terms of the old leadership adage is surround yourself with brilliant people. Some people are threatened by that. Some other going to make you look, less good. But I'm a big believer in surround yourself with exceptional people, and I feel really fortunate that I, just had great teams in all of my careers. Politics, I had great deputies, chief of staffs, great colleagues when I was in veterinary practice, and crop life, tremendous team. Genome Canada, when I was there as the chair of the board, but once again, it was a first class group of people. So great opportunities and some really great colleagues. And the other thing, well, somebody else asked me a similar kind of question, and I have to say that receiving it does cause you to reflect a little bit on your past and maybe what were some of the pivotal moments. And as I've reflected, I actually go back to my days when I was in the Willows 4-H club, and my early 4-H days, and the good fortune I had even with those clubs to do some interesting things. I was, one of the big prizes in Saskatchewan 4-H back and then was the Dalgliesh Prize, which meant 6 weeks in England and Scotland at Peter Dalglish's expense, which was a great eye-opening experience. So, on reflection, things like the foundations of my growth through the 4-H organization, on reflection, just became that much more important as I thought about it.
That is super cool. Lorne, honestly, on behalf of myself and RealAgriculture, and I think a ton of people out in our audience, congratulations on the Order of Canada. It is extremely well-deserved, and I greatly appreciate very, very much you willing to have a chat with us about your career and the achievement.
Thanks. My pleasure.